Meantime, Baloo and Bagheera were furious with rage and grief. Bagheera climbed as he had never climbed before, but the thin branches broke beneath his weight, and he slipped down, his claws full of bark. Why did they not warn the man cub? He roared to poor Baloo, who had set off at a clumsy trot in the hope of overtaking the monkeys. What was the use of half slaying him with blows if you did not warn him? Haste, oh haste! We may catch them yet, Baloo panted. At that speed, it would not tire a wounded cow. Teacher of the law, cub beater, a mile of that, rolling to and fro, would burst the open. Sit still and think. Make a plan. This is no time for chasing. They may drop him if we follow too close. They may have dropped him already, being tired of carrying him around. Who can trust the Bandalog? Put dead bats on my head. Give me black bones to eat. Roll me into hives of wild bees that I may be stung to death, and bury me with the hyena, for I am the most miserable of bears. Oh, Mowgli, Mowgli, why did I not warn thee against monkey folk instead of breaking thy head? Now, perhaps I may have knocked the day's lesson out of his mind, and he will be alone in the jungle without the master words. Baloo clasped his paws over his ears and rolled to and fro, moaning. At least he'll give me all the words correctly a little time ago, said Bagheera impatiently. Baloo, thou hast neither memory nor respect. Why would the jungle think if I, the Black Panther, curled myself up like a porcupine and howled? What do I care what the jungle thinks? He may be dead by now. Unless and until they drop him from the branches in sport or kill him out of idleness, I have no fear for the man cub. He is wise and well taught, and above all, he has the eyes that make the jungle people afraid. But, and it is a great evil, he is in the power of the Bandalog, and they, because they live in trees, have no fear of any of our people. Bagheera licked one paw thoughtfully. Fool that I am, oh fat brown root-digging fool that I am, said Baloo, uncoiling himself with a jerk. Is it true what the wild elephant says? To each his own fear? And they, the Bandalog, fear Kaa, the rock snake. He can climb as well as he can. He steals the young monkeys in the night. The whisper of his name makes their wicked tails cold. Let us go to Kaa. What will he do for us? He is not of our tribe, being footless and with most evil eyes, said Bagheera. He is very old and cunning. Above all, he is always hungry, said Baloo hopefully. Promise him many goats. He sleeps for a full month after he has once eaten. He may be asleep now, and even were he awake, would he rather kill his own goats? Bagheera, who did not know much about Kaa, was naturally suspicious. Then, in that case, you and I together, old hunter, might make him see reason. Here, Baloo rubbed his faded brown shoulder against the panther, and they went off to look for Kaa, the rock python. They found him stretched out on a warm ledge in the afternoon sun, admiring his beautiful new coat, for he had been in retirement for the last 10 days, changing his skin, and now he was very splendid, darting his big, blunt-nosed head along the ground and twisting the 30 feet of his body into fantastic knots and curves, and licking his lips as he thought of his dinner to come. He has not eaten, said Baloo with a grunt of relief, as soon as he saw the beautifully mottled brown and yellow jacket. Be careful, Bagheera. He is always a little blind after he has changed his skin, and very quick to strike. Kaa was not a poison snake. In fact, he rather despised the poison snakes as cowards, but his strength lay in his hug, and when he had once lapped his huge coils round anybody, there was no more to be said. Good hunting, cried Baloo, sitting up on his haunches. Like all snakes of his breed, Kaa was rather deaf, and did not hear the call at first. Then he curled up, ready for an accident, his head lowered. Good hunting for us all, he answered. Oh, Baloo, what do you do here? Good hunting, Bagheera. One of us at least needs food. Is there any news of game afoot? Or even a young buck? I am as empty as dried as well. We are hunting, said Baloo carelessly. He knew that he must not hurry Kaa. He was too big. Give me permission to come with you, said Kaa. A blow or more less is nothing to thee, Bagheera or Baloo, but I have to wait for days and days in a wood path and climb half a night on the mere chance of a young ape. The branches are not what they were when I was young. Rotten twigs and dry boughs are all they are. Maybe thy great weight has something to do with the matter, said Baloo. I am a fair length. A fair length, said Kaa with a little pride. But for all that is the fault of this new-grown timber. I came very near to falling on my last hunt, very near indeed, and the noise of my slipping, for my tail was not tight wrapped round the tree, walked to the bandalog, and they called me most evil names. Footless yellow earthworm, said Bagheera under his whiskers, as though he were trying to remember something. Have they ever called me that? Said Kaa. Something of that kind, that it was that they shouted to us last moon, but we never noticed them. They will say anything, even if they have no teeth, and their face was bigger than anything because of a kid. They are indeed shameless, those Bandalog, because they are afraid of the goat's horns, Bagheera went on. Now, a snake, especially a wary old python like Kaa, very seldom shows that he is angry, but Baloo and Bagheera could see the big swallowing muscles on either side of Kaa's throat ripple and bulge. The Bandalog have shifted their grounds, he said quietly. When I came up into the sun today, I heard them whooping along the treetops. It is the Bandalog that we follow now, said Baloo, but the words stuck in his throat for the first time in his memory that one of the jungle people had owned being interested in the doings of the monkeys. Beyond doubt, then, it is no small thing that takes two such hunters, leaders in their own jungle, I am certain, on the trail of the Bandalog, Kaa replied courteously, as well as swelled with curiosity. Indeed, Baloo began, I am no more than the old and sometimes very foolish teacher of the law to the Seeonee wolf cubs, and Bagheera here is Bagheera, said the Black Panther, and his jaws shut with a snap, for he did not believe in being humble. The trouble is with this Kaa, those nut stealers and pickers of palm leaves have stolen away all of our man cub, and of whom perhaps he has heard. I heard some news from the porcupine of a man thing that was entered into a wolf pack, but I did not believe. Ikki is full of stories half heard and very badly told. But it is true. He is such a man cub as never was, said Baloo. The best and wisest and boldest of man cubs, my own pupil who shall make the name of Baloo famous through all the jungles. And besides, we, love him, Kaa. Tss, said Kaa, shaking his head to and fro. I have known what love is. There are tales that I could tell that need a clear night when we are all well fed to praise properly, said Bagheera quickly. Our man cub is in the hands of the Bandalog now, and we know that all of the jungle people they fear Kaa alone. They fear me alone. They have good reason, said Kaa, chattering, foolish, vain, foolish, and chattering are the monkeys. But a man thing in their hands is no good luck. They grow tired of the nuts they pick and throw them down. They carry a branch half a day, meaning to do great things with it, and then they snap it in two. That man thing is not to be envied. They called me also yellow fish, was it not? Earthworm, said Bagheera, as well as other things which I cannot now say for shame. We must remind them to speak well of their master. We must help them with their wandering memories. Now whither, when they went with the cub? The jungle alone knows. Toward the sunset, I believe, said Baloo. We had thought that thou would know, Kaa. I? How? I take them when they come in my way, but I do not hunt the Bandalog or frogs, or green scum, or on a water hole for that matter. Up! Look up, Baloo! Look at the Seeonee wolf pack! Baloo looked up to see where the voice came from, and there was Chill sweeping down with the sun shining on the upturned phalanges of his wings. He was near Chill's bedtime, but he had ranged all over the jungle looking for the bear and had missed him in the thick foliage. What is it? Said Baloo. I have seen Mowgli among the Bandalog. Let me tell you, I watched. The Bandalog have taken him beyond the river to the monkey city, to the cold lairs. They may stay there for a night, or 10 hours, or an hour. I have told the bats to watch through the dark time. That is my message. Good hunting, all of you below. Full gorge and deep sleep to you, Chill, cried Bagheera. I will remember thee in my next kill and put aside the head for thee alone. Oh, best. It is nothing, it is nothing. The boy held the master word. I could have done no less, and Chill circled up again to his root. He has not forgotten to use his tongue, said Baloo with a chuckle of pride. To think of one of those young remembering the master word for the birds too, while he was being pulled across trees. It was most firmly driven into him, said Bagheera. But I am proud of him, and now we must go to the cold lairs. They all knew where that place was, but very few of the jungle people ever went there, because they called the cold lairs was an old deserted city, lost and buried in the jungle, and beasts seldom use a place that men have once used. The men, wild boar will, but the hunting tribes do not. Besides, the monkeys lived there as much as they could be said to live anywhere, and no self respecting animal would come within eyeshot of it, except in times of drought, when the half ruined tanks and reservoirs held a little water. It is half a night's journey at full speed, said Bagheera, and Baloo looked very serious. I will go as fast as I can, he said anxiously. We dare not wait for you. Follow, Baloo. We must go quick, on foot. Kaa and I. Feet or no feet, I can keep abreast of all thy four, said Kaa shortly. Baloo made one effort to hurry, but had to sit down panting, and so they left to come on later, while Bagheera hurried forward at the quick panther canter. Kaa said nothing, but strive as Bagheera might, the huge rock python held level with him. When they came to a hill stream, Bagheera gained, because he bounded across while Kaa swam, his head and 2 feet of his neck clearing the water, but on level ground, Kaa made up the distance. By the broken lock that freed me, said Bagheera, when twilight had fallen, thou art no slower go. I am hungry, said Kaa. Besides, they called me speckled frog, worm, earthworm, and yellow to boot. All one, let us go on, and Kaa seemed to paw himself along the ground, finding the shortest road with his steady eyes and keeping to it. In the cold lairs, the monkey people were not thinking of Mowgli's friends at all. They had brought the boy to the lost city and were very pleased with themselves for the time. Mowgli had never seen an Indian city before, and though this was almost a heap of ruins, it seemed very wonderful and splendid. Some king had built it long ago on a little hill. You could still see the stone causeways that led up to the ruined gates, where the last splinters of wood hung to the worn, rusted hinges. Trees had grown into and out of the walls. The battlements were tumbled down and decayed, and wild creepers hung out of the windows of the towers on the hills, on the walls in bushy, hanging clumps. A great roofless palace crowned the hill, and the marble of the courtyards and the fountains was split and stained with red and green. And the very cobblestones in the courtyard where the king's elephants used to live had been thrust up and apart by grasses and young trees. From the palace you could see the rows and rows of roofless houses that made up the city looking like empty honeycombs, filled with blackness. The shapeless block of stone that had been idle in the square where 4 roads met, the pits and dimples at street corners where the public wells once stood, and the shattered domes of temples with wild figs sprouting out on their sides. The monkeys called the place their city and pretended to despise the jungle people because they lived in the forest. And yet they never knew what the buildings were made, nor how to use them. They would sit in circles on the hall in the king's council chamber, scratch for fleas, and pretend to be men. Or they would run in and out of the roofless houses and collect pieces of plaster and old bricks in a corner, and forget where they had hidden them. A fight and a cry in scuffling crowds, and then break off to play up and down the terraces of the king's garden, where they would shake the rose trees and the oranges in sport to see the fruit and flowers fall. They explored all of the passages and dark tunnels in the palace, and the hundreds of little dark rooms, but they never remembered what they had seen and what they had not, and so drifted about in ones or twos or crowds, telling each other what they were doing as men did. They drank at the tanks and made the water all muddy, and then they fought over it, and then they would all rush together in mobs and shout. There is no one in the jungle so wise and clever and strong and gentle as the Bandalog. Then all would begin again, till they grew tired of the city and went back to the treetops, hoping the jungle people would notice them. Mowgli, who had been trained under the law of the jungle, did not like or understand this kind of life. The monkeys dragged him into the cold lairs late in the afternoon, and instead of going to sleep as Mowgli would have done after a long journey, they joined hands and danced about and sang their foolish songs. One of the monkeys made a speech and told his companions that Mowgli's capture marked a new thing in the history of the Bandalog, for Mowgli was going to show them how to weave sticks and canes together as a protection against rain and cold. Mowgli picked up some creepers and began to work them in and out, and the monkeys tried to imitate, but in a very few minutes they lost interest and began to pull their friends' tails or jump up and down on all fours, coughing. I wish to eat, said Mowgli. "I am a stranger in this part of the jungle. Bring me food, or give me leave to hunt here." 20 or 30 monkeys bounded away to bring him nuts and wild pawpaws, but they fell to fighting on the road, and it was too much trouble to go back with what was left of the fruit. Mowgli was sore and angry, as well as hungry, and he roamed through the empty city, giving the strangers hunting call from time to time. But no one answered him, and Mowgli felt he had reached a very bad place indeed. All that Baloo has said about the Bandalog is true, he thought to himself. They have no law, no hunting call, and no leaders, nothing but foolish words and little picking, thievish hands. So if I am starved or killed here, it will be all my own fault. But I must try to return to my own jungle. Baloo will surely beat me, but that is better than chasing those silly rose leaves with the Bandalog. No sooner had he walked to the city than the monkeys pulled him back, telling him that he did not know how happy he was, and pinching him to make him grateful. He set his teeth and said nothing, but went with the shouting monkeys to a terrace above the red sandstone reservoirs that were half full of rainwater. There was a ruined summer house of white marble in the centre of the terrace, built for the Queen's dead 100 years ago. The domed roof had half fallen in and blocked up the underground passage from the palace by which the queens used to enter. But the halls were made of marble tracery, beautiful milk white fencing, and gorgeous flowers, and as the moon came up behind the hill, it shone through the open work, casting shadows on the ground like black velvet embroidery.